New to the LFL Showdown, the 2022 Spring Amazon EU Masters Finals, a bout between two French heavyweights for the greatest title in the European regional leagues. Our combatants, starting on the red side, undefeated so far in their run with a record of 12-0. The former Amazon EU Masters champions from Spring 2020, the reigning LFL champions and challengers to the title. The Foxes, it's LDLC. And their opponents, the back-to-back winners of the Amazon EU Masters and the first team in the history of the tournament to complete a reverse sweep. The reigning, defending champions, the Blue Wall. It's Karmine Corp. The hype battle is about to begin. Let's make this a clean fight.
I mean, look, let's be realistic. You couldn't take us down in LFL. LFL champions right here. Undefeated in the Amazon EU Masters right now. The best mid-jungle in the Amazon EU Masters right now. There is nobody that can touch us. You're not going to stand a chance coming into today. We beat you once, we're going to send you packing again.
Boy, you won LFL once and you think you're what? We are back-to-back Amazon European Masters champions. You know how many teams thought they could take us down? The NLC, I can still hear them cry. You get to the finals versus Karmine Corp, you go back home bloody.
Yeah, covered in your blood. It's funny, you're called the Blue Wall. You blew over real easy when it came to our playoff stage. And now you're coming back once again. You don't stand a chance.
Wait, is that a fox on your logo? Because we're gonna send you home with your tails under your legs.
Yeah, it's funny that you're talking about us being foxes because we're kind of used to eating trash, so real glad you're here today.
But you know what? It's about drive and it's about power. Because we stay hungry, we devour.
Smells like someone needs a shower because honestly, you're absolute trash. You stink on the rift, you stink off the rift. And honestly, I can't even see you from all the way down.
You know what? I can fix that. Bring it in.
Like, what is this? What is this?
I'm just gonna show you what a 3-beat looks like.
Na miejscu, Syndra, czy poradzi sobie z midlane, teraz niebieska gaming, bardzo dobry start i po prostu kajtuje, ale no!
East is chaos all over the map, right? X7 are ahead of the play. Goodbye, dude.
Shikari's in trouble. He's going to try and find his way out. Wait for the Shadow Surge! And the Rocky just goes wide, but a final auto secures it anyway.
Welcome to Berlin, Germany, home of the Amazon European Masters Grand Finals, where one team will reclaim the throne of Europe tonight. Can Karmine Corp achieve this historical three-peat, or will LDLC tear down the Blue Wall to win their second title? I'm Medic, and joining me today are Trouble Merriweather and Dagda McGregor, I'm pretty sure, who are going to guide us through the action tonight. How are you guys doing?
Good. I mean, look, these are fighting words, so I'm ready for a fight on the rift and off the rift.
I mean, we should do this again sometime, okay? We had too much fun.
As long as you don't do the physical part of it, because I'm pretty sure that would be quite one-sided.
Let's have a look at smoke me.
100%. Let's have a look back at our semi-finals where LDLC eliminated the last non-LFL team to secure us an all-French EU Masters finals, and it's French as far as the eye can see here in the bracket. LDLC, Karmine Corp, Vitality V, and now the finals as well.
Yeah, and it's been really impressive seeing LDLC kind of continue that domination with the 12-0 streak right now. Maybe see if they make it 15-0 today, I don't know. But realistically, they have looked like the strongest team in the Amazon EU Masters. I'm excited to see just if they can continue the strength in the early game that we've seen and then being able to play at that super strong mid game that we've seen them throughout the tournament.
And honestly, it's been really fun watching them throughout the tournament, like you mentioned, Dagda, because they've been playing their game start to finish. This stellar mid to late game team-fighting prowess that they have, it seems like no team has been able to shut them down so far.
Would be the first team ever to go undefeated through the entirety of an EU Masters, which is incredibly impressive, obviously. And having done it after winning the LFL in such dominant fashion, it feels like it's the next inevitable step for this LDLC lineup.
Yeah, especially just when I look at the way that they're able to approach the game, right? It feels like they may not have the players that are going to like absolutely outright win the laning phase, but when you look at how they're able to orchestrate their mid game with Eika playing off in side lanes, grouping up in this like 1-4 movement, and being able to just catch people unaware, set up for objectives really well, it feels really tough to fight toe-to-toe against LDLC.
And their opponents on the Rift, of course, are Karmine Corp, who completed the first ever reverse sweep in EU Masters history last week as they took down Vitality B, and now are looking for the first ever three-peat as well in EU Masters.
And it feels so weird because a lot of the people were not expecting K-Corp to make it to the finals, and in a lot of people's mouths it came out as an upset, the fact that they are in the finals right now. And for the back-to-back champions, that strikes a little bit weird. It took them a while to find their footing into this best of 5, but when they did finally, they looked very dominant.
And I feel like it wasn't really a stylistic change coming through from Karmine Corp that really brought them here. It was individual performers really stepping up. Hantera on the Rakan was absolutely insane. I love to see him on this pick. And as well, then you look at like Cabochard on the Renekton going 12-1 in Game 5. Like, these individual performers really came to life as we got closer and closer towards the end of that series.
And I think one of the big questions that we have coming into today is, can that individual brilliance overcome LDLC's team brilliance? Because LDLC seem very much more like a team that has all of their ducks in a row, whereas Karmine Corp are still trying to find those little bits here and there to see if everything can fit. Though before tonight's matchup, we look at... Sorry, I had to switch cameras. I'm not used to this. I'm so sorry, guys. Before we look ahead to tonight's matchup, let's recap some of our highlights through the disappointments and the highlights of the tournament. Let's start off with the highlights, guys. Trouble. Kick me off with a player that you think has really shone in the EU Masters.
Do I do it again? I've already done a Telestrator. I've tried my hardest to persuade people, but I'll do it again. I think Sigenda has showed up big time in this particular Amazon European Masters. He did win back in 2020 summer with a Go Rogue, jumped into the LEC. Some say a little bit of a questionable performance into the LEC, but this is what comes when you're a champion. You go back down and you rise back up again, and I think that's what Sigenda has done in this particular tournament. His stats are great. The fact that he's brought a champion Ocean to the top lane is great, especially when this meta right now is full of tanks, bringing the Akalis, the Lucians. I feel like this guy is sort of like the Broken Blade of the ARLs, if you will. And
I also love the way he's been able to interact with his mid and jungle as well, because oftentimes what you'll see is like him pushing in the wave and linking up with both of them to make sure he's going for invades, getting these kills, and as Trouble was already pointing out, being able to have this flexibility between the tanks, like counter picks like the Akali that we've seen as well. He feels like he's able to fit so many different styles, and whatever's really needed from him on Vitality B, he's been able to step up massively with it.
And speaking of different styles, let's have another look at another player that really shone. Aggo Rogue had a stellar performance making it to the semi-finals, and I know, Rob, that you had your eye on one particular player.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I looked at this man's champion pool and went, excuse me? Like, these aren't supposed to be in the position that they're in, but he has shown tremendously on these picks, and it's the fact that not only do you have like the Zerits, these kind of cool control mages, like even a Sion game they had from the regular split, you're looking at the way he's able to position in lane is fantastic, position in team fights is great, and being able to step up as the main carry for Aggo Rogue numerous times. It felt like FLICKR could nearly do no wrong, and even you saw the Twitch clips there, him being able to play multiple different styles depending on whether he's on a mage or on a Twitch assassin or an AD carry is what I love about this player.
And I feel like the fact that he has such a wide champion pool, right? The fact that he plays the Sorakas, the Sions, the Zeroths, you need to move differently on the map and adapt to the situation, the champion that's been given to you. And for somebody who's usually used to playing marksman, being able to adapt and roam in these particular timings that you have that are so tight, it's just stellar to see.
Well, let's move on to the other side of, the highlights and the disappointments. There's a few moments, few teams, few players that perhaps have left us feeling like we have no milk left for our cereal. Just disappointment in the morning. Trouble. I'm going to start with a team that perhaps disappointed us from moving from the NLC in the beginning of the year and then disappointed us on the Rift as well.
I mean, it's just normal. If you leave the NLC, you can't supposedly get any higher. But all jokes aside, I think Fnatic Team Keso was a little bit of a disappointment coming in as the favorites. Made finals representing the NLC, couldn't make it past quarters representing the Super League.
Yeah, I think Fnatic like techie arrow, but unfortunately it hasn't been so hot for you. And I was really disappointed in the way that they couldn't really get their set play set up. You look at like trying to go for dive on the bottom side, it came across very sloppy where they didn't give across kills. Then you got into the mid game, they really couldn't figure themselves out. And even going up against Vitality B, it just felt like Vitality B were playing their style just better.
And the LFL, I think, has just been playing better than most regions at this tournament. There's a reason there's two of those teams in the finals. But I want to talk about a region perhaps that has disappointed us a little bit. And it's a region very close to home for all of us. The NLC has really struggled this EU Masters.
Sorry, I just got a heart attack. Absolutely. I feel like being the back-to-back finalists and only falling to Karmine Corp, the last hurdle that no one's been able to beat so far. It's a little bit of a disappointment. Bringing Harrow and Tempt as well, the world champion. I think we all had our eyes on X7 and they just didn't deliver.
They really didn't. But two teams that did deliver are LDLC and Karmine Corp, as they showed us exceptional plays throughout the entire tournament to get to this all-or-nothing grand finals. Let's take a look.
Let the LFL shout out proud, as it will be K-Corp against LDLC.
They're gonna wait for his Haymaker to lose the shield so they know they can take him out. 1-1-3 just breaking ankles right now. The Destiny Gate is his Amazon EU Masters K-Corp.
They've rooted him down. They're going to try and get the kill, but the Nethergrass came up, and that means Haru is dead. Kissigna for a runner-up. Double kill for Ragner, who throws down the ult. And LDLC are just running away with it. The train is unstoppable.
Remember, Ezreal takes a little while to really start hitting properly. Oh, there's another job! SAKEN just nails Rakan. Oh, what a bullet time! K-Corp are indomitable.
Can they keep Yike out of the pit? Ike is stepping forward, Call of the Ford's got tempted trouble, goes golden, solar flare timed out, and maybe they've done it! They've stayed too long, they can't clean the Baron! Haru on the other side, can't get in! LDLC will secure Baron after this as well! He's got flash still, he's gonna be fine.
1-1-3 wants to try and maybe turn off this tower and just go for him. They're gonna be able to lock him down, shut him out, and that's just good proactive play from Karmine.
LDLC don't have time to respond with the Dragon, and they have to actually respond.
Oh, they might have caught Syndra back on the back line here. So much damage comes on through. Sideways comes out, but the Camille is down. They're going to be able to grab up that one, move into the pit now, looking to potentially steal this one away. Rekkles is still there, though, as Yike, the barrier goes down to Teleport coming through. Who's going to be stolen by LDLC?
So many highlight moments from both LDLC and Karmine Corp, especially that Yike Baron steal. What a moment that was.
I lost my mind. I was like, she has flash.
Absurd to see. But it is important as well for us to know, although they haven't met in the EU Masters yet this season, they have met before this spring in a best of 5. LDLC versus Karmine Corp were in the Kings match, the top match of the LFL playoffs, and then it was very one-sided.
Yeah, and I think it kind of got to show what LDLC are capable of, especially when you look at the early game, right? Game 1, not particularly bloody, but great objective control coming through from LDLC and controlling the pace of that game. Then you come into game 2, and it's LDLC picking up the pace and going, hey, we can beat you by just killing Cabochard over and over again. We can take over in that regard as well. And game 3, even though it was incredibly close, that's where we saw the mid-game from LDLC come online, where they actually could play the map better, even against things like the Twisted Fate.
And this is the style that LDLC loves to play, right? Because they don't necessarily have to be explosive in the early game. They can just take the farming junglers that Yike really likes, such as the Viego, and just go very slow, allow his solo laners to take the advantage, and then you push into these mid-late game teamfights that we have seen them can execute so well.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm actually scared for Karmine Corp today. Because with LDLC, it feels like they can turn up the heat in the early game, but don't have to. They just beat the mid-game as well. So now you really need those individual performers again from Karmine Corp to step up.
It's so difficult when the enemy team has so many strings to their bow, but let's have a look at Karmine Corp. They came into this tournament with their backs against the wall, really. Their LFL performance was not of the caliber you would expect from this lineup of teams, and they only had the 3rd seed in the Amazon EU Masters.
I mean, a year ago, we didn't even know who Karmine Corp was, right? And they form a team, they win the back-to-back very convincingly here at Amazon European Masters, and then they acquire legend like Rekkles in the team, and they have to restructure and reinvent the way they want to play. Plus a new meta coming in is not that easy. They fumble at the start in the LFL, but then they rise up to the top. A little bit of a question mark there, because even though we have seen development on the way they play, it feels like, as Dagda said as well, unless the individuals really step up, it doesn't feel like they have a particular style they like to play.
I have to say, though, those individual members were absolutely insane. Like seeing Hantera consistently in the right place to turn plays around from Vitality B. You're looking at Cabochard in the top lane, who's an absolute menace as well. It feels like if you can get that, like game 3 to game 5 again, that's where you're going to see LDLC kind of go, hang on a second, lads, we've actually got to try and match this pressure.
But LDLC haven't really been pushed that far at all this year as of yet. They won the LFL regular season in dominant fashion. They won the LFL playoffs in dominant fashion. And now they are 12-0 here in the European Masters. They look indomitable. They really don't look like anyone can challenge them.
And it feels like it's just their playstyle again. I think it's very easy to read, but no one wants to necessarily challenge them and they want to play into LDLC's game. LDLC is just that much better at team fighting. I think the best of series versus X7 the 3-0 didn't really do it justice, but then again, LDLC barely broke a sweat. It felt like come to these late game fights, they just win because they're just better.
I do have to say, though, I've been incredibly impressed with LDLC's sorry, not LDLC's, Karmine Corp's resiliency. Like the fact you get the first ever reverse sweep in Amazon EU Masters, the fact that they've been able to step up so spectacularly as well in the individuals, that's where I think the experience and the veterancy that is on Karmine Corp can lend itself today, especially when it's going to be a repeat of that round 2 from the LFL playoffs.
Of course, Karmine Corp looking for their 3rd title in a row. LDLC looking to join Karmine Corp on 2 titles. Now, to get a better understanding of why LDLC is still undefeated throughout this tournament, Trouble, I know you wanted to walk us through some of their key power points.
Absolutely. And when we talk about LDLC, we usually talk about a lot of the pressure that they will generate on the early game to allow their carries to get fed for this stellar that we mentioned later on, team fights in the game. And I wanted to highlight some of these moments. I'm going to start the clip right here. Or my production will. I will do it. There we go. So at this point, if you look on the map, we still have Exakick pushing down the bot lane, which is exactly what he will do. He doesn't go towards the top side. The Herald is being taken away. But what LDLC will do, they will only bring 4 members onto this fight, not necessarily to try and take the Rift Herald, but dissuade the situation. Not only do they take the Rift Herald for themselves, they honestly actually decline a Go Rogue from picking up the eye. Really close, but yet so far. But what's happening on the other side of the map? Because when the camera actually gets there, you'll see that Exakick pushed in the tower, backed out, and then he's gonna push under the tower again. And by that time, you'll see that DOS has joined him as well, which means he's under no pressure of dying at this point, and he will cash in 2 turret platings. Now, that was number 1 situation that happened in this game that gave 2 turret platings to Exakick. I'm gonna pause this right here, and as you can see on the minimap, the fact that this Kha'Zix is leaving the base, you guys can't see him, but he's right there, he's leaving the base, means that he has died. If you look right here, top lane from LDLC is there as well, and the Viego is actually super fair at this point, has 4 kills. But what happens again to the other side of the map? They do not care, giving up their top side of the map as long as that hyper carry gets all the turrets and the gold. Look here, he's taken the entire tower, all of the turret platings pre-minute 14, and he's actually gonna push yet another wave to get the entire tower on the bot side of the map. Now, what does that tell us? Yes, LDLC gives so much gold into Exakick's pocket, but what does he do with the gold? That's exactly what he does. And the fact that the Zarya here is not an auto-attack champion at this point, it's more of a poke champ. It doesn't show very flashy, but the fact that he did 24k damage compared to anyone else's damage in this game, it shows that the investment is really worth to put all your gold into your AD carry and then allow him to slowly but surely carry the game later on.
And it was an interesting investment to see LDLC do, because we saw a similar thing from Karmine Corp on the other side of the map. All the time, it was about how far ahead can we get Cabochard in their series versus Vitality B, until they changed the draft in the middle of the series and said, maybe we need to do something a little bit more around that bottom side. I do want to talk a little bit more about LDLC's mid-game strength, though, because have a look at this. Gold at 14, 890 ahead. Gold at 20, that's 6 minutes later. 4.2 thousand gold ahead of their opponents. It is just such a monumental advantage they get in that middle portion of the 15 to 20 minute mark.
Yeah, and it just feels like it's so hard to try and fight against this, right? Because when you actually look at the way that they're able to set up their objectives, consistently you have Eika pushing sides, he'll then group with the other 4 members, and they'll very quickly establish vision control. And they're always very good at cross-mapping to ensure that they have vision at the objective as well. So by the time you actually get yourself to try and fight at a neutral, LDLC have already established themselves. It never really feels like it's an even fight. And even when you do, LDLC's team fights are exceptional. So it becomes so hard to actually battle against them on any sort of even footing.
And I want to talk about one of the players you mentioned as well, Trouble, Exakick. Probably actually the longest standing member on LDLC, which is surprising to say considering he's only 18 years old. But the amount of funnel and the resources LDLC give him is just such a demonstration of the trust they have for this player.
It's not only the trust, because he can output the damage due to the time and resources that he's been given. It's also the macro that comes from the guy. He plays any champion, but he plays it like Caitlyn. He will take the entire bot side of the map, and then they will move him around the map to take even more vision. Like Dagda mentioned, the fact that they're so dominant in vision and objectives is because they will use that cannon that they've created of Exakick, just move it around the map, take more towers, force their vision further in.
Yeah, and especially when you're looking at like the compositions that LDLC tend to run, like they end up having these death balls that are 5-man grouped fights. So you end up with an AD carry that's super strong that then works very well towards these neutral fights. And I expect something very similar here today, where we're going to see LDLC tend towards these 5v5s where Exakick can pop off.
It's going to be really interesting to see how that dynamic works as the series goes on. Now, ahead of Grand Finals tonight, Ashin is standing by live with LDLC's veteran mid laner, Eika. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Medic. I am joined, of course, by LDLC's mid laner, Eika. Welcome, of course. You've got a big day ahead of you, so I'll try to keep these questions pretty short, my friend. But get straight to the point on this one here. You obviously have a lot of previous experience, a wealth of knowledge within the league scene. You had a stint in EU LCS and, of course, LCS itself. How has that benefited yourself and your team coming into EUM 2022?
I mean, for sure, the past experience helps as a player to manage stress, I guess. I mean, I think it's really the most important thing right now that I'm trying to not fix, I would say, for the team, but I'm trying to make sure that we are gonna play in a good. I mean, we're gonna be like enjoying ourselves. I think is the most important, because I know like stress can take a lot of things away from like a BO5. That important. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just my experience is is helping me to help my teammates to handle stress, I guess.
Okay, so you're kind of just keeping everyone a cool head as such, you know, in the high stress situations. And obviously, this is a very similar lineup to what you had in 2021. You have changed, of course, top and jungle. 2021 wasn't exactly a stellar year. So can you tell me, you know, how the impact of bringing in Ragner and Yike was for yourself and for the team as a whole?
I mean, obviously, since we made like the changes, it was really big for us. Because, I mean, just right before the tryouts, we were like, okay, I mean, those guys are pretty good, and I think we want to play with them for the next year. So we try to secure them as fast as we could, so we can start practicing. And yeah, I mean, they are really good individually. We are getting along very well, like outside of league as well. We are having a lot of fun. We are always bantering each other and always flaming each other. So yeah, I mean, it's just the atmosphere is just really good. Last year it was also really good, but just this time it feels like maybe more of like the stars are kind of aligning for us, you know. Like we have a good atmosphere. We are winning everything. We're having a lot of fun playing together. So yeah, I mean, it's just we have been blessed since they arrived, I guess.
Just a good time overall. That's really good to hear. And you know, obviously, you're a veteran of the LFL. You've been there for quite a while. You've seen it, the rise and the fall of it as well. In kind of how, in your words, I suppose, why do you think the LFL has become such a phenomenon, really, with the fans and of course with the players as well?
I mean, I think it's a mix of everything, maybe. Like the league is kind of hyped because like casters are kind of doing a good job as well. We have a lot of viewer base, I think, and maybe it's just. I mean, honestly, it's hard to describe. I think French fans just are getting into league right now in LFL and are just enjoying as well. K-Corp, the arriving of K-Corp just helped a lot with the numbers as well. Like everything is just. I mean. Since the LFL is like just crazy right now, it's only going up from the day they started the LFL. They created it, so I mean, I don't know. The first year they created it as well. I think we won EU Masters as well. I mean, I don't remember which team did, but yeah, it's I mean.
Yeah,
the growth is just crazy,
massive tidal wave, as you say, for just kind of seeing it rise and keep going as well. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to keep it short like that. You've got plenty to do, of course, and the best of luck to you in your best of 5.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we're going to send it back over to Medic on the analyst desk.
Thank you very much, Sion. Great to hear from Eika. And as he said, a tidal wave of support in the LFL and in France at the moment for those teams, and understandably so. They are going to have 5 of the 9 EU Masters titles under their belts after today. We're going to see a French champion for 3 splits in a row. It is just domination from this region. I want to talk a little bit about the other side of the Eika coin, SAKEN. He obviously had a very good semi-final in most people's eyes, but this guy continues to show that you can continue to develop even after you've had a failed attempt perhaps at the LEC stage.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed not only with SAKEN just in playoffs, but also kind of the growth we've seen coming through from the main event into playoffs. It felt like initially we were starting to see him contend towards picks like the Rise, the Twisted Fate, these things that could try and play side lanes. But now in playoffs, he's kind of taken that step back with a ton of bans going his direction, on towards things like the Azir, on towards things like the Victor, and taking a step up as a major damage dealer for this team. And I think that growth has been really impressive to see how the team is now able to lean on him to honestly be one of the major regions. There are major reasons why they're in the final.
And I'd say it's great to see the adaptability as well, right? Especially when you have Rekkles in the team, you need these mages that create control and space around your AD carry as well. And not only does he do that, but he's also one of the main damage dealers for his team. I think only in the semis, we saw him do about 50% of his team's damage. And even though I agree with you, he used to play the Romans, we knew him for his rise. I think going back to the Aziz and the Victors is great for him because now his team know what they want to play through, which is that mid lane. It is SAKEN. He's the only remaining member, again, of the OG Karmine Corp that took everything by storm back in 2021 spring.
Yeah, my big question, though, was coming in today against LDLC. I feel like we need to see SAKEN step up once more because realistically, I think you're going to be pressured through that mid-jungle, and I feel like SAKEN needs to be kind of the one that's directing 113, helping 113 in a lot of situations, because if you start to fall apart through that 2v2, I think this game is going to be done.
You know, although he might not be as experienced on the international stage as perhaps a Cabochard or a Rekkles, he has got almost the most EU Masters games of any player in history. He's currently sitting at 80. Matty is the highest at 82. So no matter the result today, yeah, exactly. No matter the result today, SAKEN will be the most experienced, the gamingest gamer of them all in the Amazon EU Masters.
Gaming gamer.
He's just totally gaming all the time. I do want let's move on a little bit from that mid lane discussion, though, because it's one we'll continue to have throughout the course of the series, and talk about the top side of the map. Cabochard and Ragner, sorry, escaped my brain there for a second. Two of the most discordant top laners I've ever seen. Like, these guys couldn't be more different in the way they seem to approach the game.
Red versus yellow.
Yeah.
Well, look, I gotta say, I love that we're kind of seeing the dichotomy between these two, right? Because you look at Ragner, he loves his tanks, the Orns, the Sions, these kind of things that can allow him to play weak side. And it feels like, as we're talking about Exakick, that's what like feeds into Exakick being so strong in team fights, because he's got this deliberately strong front line in Ragner. But when you look across the Cabochard, it's a very different story. He wants to be the carry. He's the one that is getting the resources from Karmine Corp. And we've seen him post up absolutely insane numbers. If you look at him from the main event, it was a 1,700 gold difference of 15 on just Cabochard. And this is why you're looking at things like the Lucian, the Gnar, the Graves, these things that can actually step up to be a little bit more of a carry-focused top laner.
And to me, seeing that, it makes it a little bit scary playing against LDLC, right? Because Ragnar, playing all these tanks, is very used to playing on against very aggressive top laners, and Cabochard did seem to struggle the first two games onto the Graves. So seeing only split pushes kind of gives a telltale of, oh, we want to play that one particular game style, and if you shut it down, we're not sure if we can win the game.
Karmine Corp did show us a little bit of adaptability in the Vitality B series. Near the end of it, it was Renekton with Hullbreaker, which perhaps is the best adaptability we've ever seen. But another place that they did change things around was Hantera. First two games, he was on the Braum and the Braum alone, but then he was unleashed on this Rakan as the series went forward.
Yeah, I'm just going to gush about this lad for a little bit, because I was so impressed with Hantera, especially because he's kind of been talked about as one of the weaker supports that we've seen in the Amazon EU Masters. To then have him step up so massively throughout the last 3 games in that series was absolutely insane. Consistently finding the ways to turn around the plays from Vitality to be in mid lane, was consistently getting these big engages off. Hantera and SAKEN, for me, were the 2 MVPs of this series that hard carried them to cross the finish line for Vitality B, and it was incredible to see him step up in the manner he had.
It definitely was, and obviously, you know, as a Rakan, one trick, I'm going to gush over any Rakan, but the mobility you have, the ability to start up team fights, it really felt like Karmine Corp needed someone that could pull the trigger a little bit more than you can on a Braum, and instead of disengages, be that engaged. And I do want to come back to sort of the general discussion we touched on about drafts as we've gone through this, because Karmine Corp's drafts at the start of their series versus Vitality B were so different to their drafts at the end. And I know, Rob, you have a few points you want to highlight about why you weren't a fan of these drafts.
Yeah, the biggest problem for me was that you give skins across the Lee Sin, which you're going to see up on the screen behind me. It felt like this was such an important pick, and it took 2 games for them to really take it off the board. I would have much rather see the priority, like drop the priority on the Olaf ban and going to get that Lee Sin out of the equation straight off. Also, just weird kind of bans like, oh, well, we've got the Veigar ban, so you're like, oh, well, we're going to go for the Ahri pick, and then game 1 they banned the Ahri. Like, it didn't really make sense or kind of a coherent through line as to what they were going for. And especially when you're seeing the amount of bans that were tossed towards SAKEN in that series, it feels like we need to get a different ballpark game coming through here for Karmine Corp and how they prioritize their drafts.
And I'm going to hit a little bit more on the top lane, because I felt like the Graves was so obvious the LDLC. I feel like every time that Cabo might feel under pressure, he will resort either on the Gangplank, the Graves, or the Renekton that we've seen with the Hullbreaker, which is the last case scenario that we saw. But like having that blue side, you usually want to play something that's a little bit more aggressive. And I feel like it's so difficult to play Graves into these champions. Even the other one where they even had like a mage mid lane, a longer Reigns made mid lane. It was just so impossible to play the Graves. And they did this back-to-back, and they were the ones choosing the blue side. So you generally want to pick one blind pickable champion that does well into pretty much everything. Yes, Graves is that, but Cabo really struggled. And my question mark here and worry is that he resorted back to his Renekton, because we know him for his Renekton with Hullbreaker, but that's last year's news. And it's a little bit worrying to see, is Renekton all that's left when your back's against the wall?
We'll see if they can adapt things in the draft. It's time to put both you guys on the spot. Last week, I'm just saying this, chat, I was the only one to get the correct result. I said Karmine Corp were going to win. No one else said it. Dagda. Oh, we'll start with you. Who's going to win today?
I'm going 3-0 LDLC. I think it's a repeat from playoffs.
Okay. Okay, 3-0 LDLC.
I'll go with 3-2 Karmine Corp.
Okay, what you like LDLC is explained, right? What do you think Karmine Corp can win?
Yes.
Are you okay? So how? Like why?
Oh,
why? We've got like an extra minute here. Why are Karmine Corp going to win? Because like everyone I talk to thinks LDLC is going to take this one.
I think LDLC are really strong, but I've seen Karmine Corp in the finals, and I've seen them bleed in anything but the finals. But at finals, they are just a whole different beast. They've brought it every time, no matter what team they've played against. And I think when that bell starts ringing that we're playing finals, boys, they just bring their game.
Sometimes finals are just so unpredictable, as you say, Trouble. Karmine Corp for Trouble, LDLC for Dagda. The LFL has already eliminated every other region. But tonight, we're not only crowning the kings of France. Wait. France and Kings doesn't usually go together, but we are crowning the kings of Europe. LDLC or Karmine Corp reclaiming a throne that once was there, or a historical three-peat for the blue wall. It's all or nothing.
Thank you so much, Medic. I am Ushin. I am joined here on the cast by the very tall Nymera and not as tall Goldberg. How are we both doing, guys? Sorry to call you off on that. That's real mean of me, but how are you getting on?
Well, outside of that fact, you know, I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm feeling pretty good about today's games as well. Feels like, you know, it's been a lot of 3-0s, especially coming out from LDLC, but I actually have a little feeling that this one might be a little more competitive than what people might be anticipating.
Yeah, I think for me, I looked at those semi-finals between Karmine Corp and Vitality B, and I saw a lot of good adaptation for Karmine Corp to understand their own weaknesses that they've been suffering through this competition and can start papering over some of those cracks. I think they've kept developing, they've kept improving, and I think they're going to be dangerous in these finals.
We'll have to wait and see. It is going to be going straight into picks and bans. We got ourselves pretty standard setup. Blue side has been the preferred, red side has been the preferred because you do get that counter pick. So Karmine Corp, they're going to have to try and get something strong off the bat.
But it's funny you mention that, because Karmine Corp have picked blue side more often than not. They're currently 8-2 on blue side. They've had it 10 games over on there, only 4-2 over on red side. So they've actually bucked the trend a little bit, and they preferred their own power picks. They've loved playing stuff like the Zeri. They've had that through in a couple of their drafts, more so than a lot of teams at this tournament. And what's interesting to me now is okay, you are against this team in LDLC who don't really care about their own side, but what are the power picks you're going to bring out against them?
And generally speaking, we'll be curious to see where they will be lying their priority. I feel like, especially with the mid laners, right? They have some picks where they differ from each other. That's why we see the Rise ban come through as well. But also at the same time, they both love playing LeBlanc. And SAKEN as a player specifically, I love you bring out the point that K-Corp are very adaptable in their series as well, because they kind of cracked the code on what worked for them. They found out, you know what? We need something in the backline for SAKEN that makes sure that he's not in any threat or any danger when they finally have something that dives in towards the backline, like the Victor, like the Azir. And now it's going to be curious to see what will be what you bring into the matchup of LDLC, because they've really struggled against them in playoffs.
And this is the thing, this is the only other shared champion between these two mids.
Exactly.
The Ahri and the LeBlanc. Now, SAKEN doesn't actually play stuff like the Veigar, which we've also seen a lot during this tournament, but this is going back to more of the pre-tournament, early tournament Karmine Corp that we saw in that style that they played. Get SAKEN onto a champion which gets to skirmish early, get out of lane and start affecting things. Now it's on Eika to have a strong laning pick against what has typically been a banned champion against Karmine Corp.
And it's so interesting with LDLC, what we quite often will see from them as well is that they won't pick a jungler here and two. Like, a lot of teams in the meta right now on red side will pick their AD carry, they'll pick a jungler, but what we've seen in the past coming through from LDLC is that if there's not a priority pick open, like Jarvan or Volibear, who has come through the draft, well, they'll actually save it for the third pick to get the Yike on a comfortable matchup, because he loves invading. He likes being the kind of guy that gets resources for himself and chokes out the enemy jungler, and then when they find a lead, that's when they attack. But they actually differ this time around. They go for Facilitator for Yike, which is not unheard of, but it's usually not the style we see from them.
I think what this does do is it bolsters a potential mid-jungle 2v2 for LDLC. Typically, the way that I've loved, one of the big plays that I've loved from LDLC is that when they have volatile mid-jungle 2v2s, Yike does a great job at pathing, so he's always in response distance to mid lane. He'll be just on Raptors, just on Wolves, going into the enemy Raptors, making sure he's always there ready ready to be around mid. And Jarvan's very good at responding quickly to that too. So regardless of the matchup that it's into, gives power to one of LDLC's hallmark strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to see Rekkles going back to the Ezreal. We did see it in their last series, not to the greatest success, but I do believe that was more of a composition issue than it was anything to do with the Ezreal itself.
I mean, I believe there was that flash Q kill under tower.
It was pretty
top
good.
lane. There was some flashy moments, but again, it's not necessarily been the flavor of the competition in the tournament so far. We saw a Go Rogue play a lot of the Ezreal. Outside of that, it has typically been more your crit hyperscaling carries.
But Karmine Corp will also just play the style they've always played, like historically in European Masters. They're not giving, I mean, Rekkles a lot of resources. It was one of the things they really struggled with in the first games when they were playing against Vitality, because he just didn't get to play the game where he was zoned off too many waves. But with the Ezreal, you allow him to play this kind of safe play style where you can play up towards the top side with Cabo, who really loves being on these carries as well. And when you already have a blind pick on coming through, maybe you need to take away a few bans. And we're already seeing that one uncharacteristic here as well, the Darius as well being banned out.
But the thing for me, and I'm looking at these second round bans from LDLC, and I think, look, LDLC have a very solid front-to-back comp for mid to late game team fights. That's typically what the LDLC have always drafted towards. They draft typically to survive early and just make sure they get all their checklists done of, okay, your mid's into the game, Exakick has been left on a side lane to get first tower, something like that, and then they get to the bigger team fights. For me, this draft from Karmine Corp already with the 3 picks locked in means they need to get early advantages. You let that Sion and that Aphelios get too far ahead, it's going to be very difficult to fight them on an even footing.
I'm expecting a mid lane pick to come through from here. We have seen what DOS can do down towards the bot side. I mean, you already know the mid laner you're playing against, right? So why not save that support counter pick, unless you really have a priority, like a Leona or anything like that. But outside of that fact, I'm expecting LDLC to just save that counter pick. And what you talked about as well, K-Corp having to go ahead in the early game. I feel like they at least set themselves up for it in the mid lane with the 2v2. You have LeBlanc, you have Volibear, two of the strongest skirmishers already from level 3 from the get-go when the game starts.
So that's going to be Syndra into LeBlanc. Now, this is something that can fight first couple of levels. Sometimes LeBlanc doesn't like that so much as she trades very well in terms of the damage she puts out. She tends to take a lot of that back in return. Whilst this also happens, Syndra, if you ever get to tag the back minions and also the enemy champion, gets wave shoved whilst also taking those preferential trades. But what we've seen in this tournament is when Syndra gets outside of those first couple of levels and hasn't really done that much coming into about the 15-minute mark. If you're not ahead by that point, you really start to fall off. So for me now, actually, LDLC have maybe another early game checklist they need to start filling.
And looking at these two compositions right now, it looks to me like LDLC are going for the very bog standard, easy to execute. You go in with the Jarvan aside, maybe you combo in a Rakan here, not quite. There's plenty of options there available to them. But on the other side of this, Karmine Corp are saying, look, if we can get away from that initial engage, we have an awful lot of kiting and just power within themselves to just kind of punish you for misstepping.
But I also feel like if Karmine Corp just goes even into the mid game, they will just lose out to this composition. Yes. You need someone to deal with the Sion. LeBlanc's not going to blow up that front line. Ezreal is not going to be the one blowing up that front line. If you pull behind to LDLC, right, if they start stacking up these Drakes, you're going to be having issues. You're going to be put on the timer. You're going to be put in an uncomfortable position where you have to walk into a composition that wants you to walk into them. So I feel like for Karmine Corp, if they fumble the early game, that may already be the first game away.
So for me, win conditions with Karmine Corp. Cabochard gets ahead on that top lane, gets to make sure that the Sion isn't that overpowering presence in the side lane who just gets to wave clear and be a better 5v5 champion. And also try and make LDLC buy into a couple of fights which they don't realize aren't that good for them. You got a lot of mobility on the side of Karmine Corp. They need to play around that early, make sure you pick up those early skirmishes. If you don't do that, it looks very, very difficult for them. And LDLC will slide into those team fights very healthily.
Now sliding in, it's going to be very interesting to see how, as you mentioned, the early game is going to go. It is all about how you're able to make your resources work. And something we do look towards is going to be those junglers. You're on two very proactive junglers, the Volibear versus Jarvan. We've seen it all tournament long. This is going to be something of a bit of, can they get creative with it?
I love that subject as well, because you can only imagine that some of them will be skipping camps to kind of just try and get tempo ahead of the other jungler, right? So I feel like specifically mid lane as well, the setup for both mid laners, it can come down to the first 2v2 and then it's just like whoever really starts the 2v2 to get all the CC locked down, or it can just be about who gets to the lane before the other jungler while they're still clearing Raptors if they decide to take that camp. I really feel like doing the jungle tracking in the early game is going to be pivotal, at least on the first clear of the game.
Okay, so let's see what happens with level 1 wards. That's been a big factor for teams which have tried to take down LDLC. Of course, no one has managed to do that just yet, but if Yike gets to go untracked, gets to go very close to that mid lane, again, kind of go like Red, Raptors, Gromp, kind of stick around that mid lane, this could be a very impactful early game from LDLC, even if they don't get kills.
We'll have to wait and see. There are no more hypotheses. We are going to be knowing exactly how these two teams will do. It is Karmine Corp coming up against LDLC in the Amazon EU Masters Finals. And boy, oh boy, do we have a little bit of a a David versus Goliath, because I gotta say it right off the bat, you know, you're looking at LDLC, the Des talked about it so much, but these guys are on a tear, a historical run in the EU Masters.
12-0, they've been a real spark of light in this competition when you did have, you know, this year, last year of Karmine Corp being so out there and so strong. LDLC kind of flipped the script a little bit and said, you know, this is not just a one-team region in the LFL. This has got so much talent, and we want to get ourselves back on that board.
Yeah, and problem what makes it so difficult as well is that they have stellar early games, and even when they do fumble their early games, as we sometimes see, we saw it against the Go Rogue, we saw it against X7, they find ways to stay competitive, and they don't really drop the ball, you know, they keep their calm, and they find ways to get back into the game. And that's really what makes them such a scary team. Even when you get ahead in the early game, even when you play towards your own win conditions, LDLC somehow, they just continuously find a way.
And that's the big thing as well. You talk about their early games, you can see how definitive they are as well. The fastest average game time as well, just clocking in a little bit over 28 minutes. So it is a team that when you miss that, they will just continuously punish you.
And the thing which is really interesting there for me is that actually they're not the most dominant early game team in the competition, but they will close out that game because of their dominant mid game. Like I said, it feels like their early game is solid. It serves the purpose of getting to the point where they are really, really strong. They don't need to kill you under tower dives before 10 minutes. They don't need to be doing that. They understand their powers and their power spikes of their compositions, and they play through that, honestly, better than most people in the competition.
Okay, so let's have a look at this. I thought Yike was going to continue down towards the bot side, but he did only skip his Croc so far, and he's just going to be starting up on Grump there. So what you usually can do as Jarvan as well, if you know that the enemy team has priority down towards the bot side, which you will have in the Leona into the Rakan matchup from the support's perspective, is that you can try and catch them off guard before they get the crash on 3. This time around, though, the crash will probably come through, and the junglers will probably just continue to clear their camps.
And also, Red Raptor's Grump does tend to be the fastest level 3 you get from junglers, and immediately what this allows Yike to do now is just clear towards the middle of the map, make sure that you're on blue onto wolves. Again, it's just being closer to that lane in this mid lane, which can be very flippy early. We can see that there's an ignite taken from that Syndra. It's the electrocute. It's not going to be phase rush. It's not going to be TP. And we see both these junglers, again, hovering around this lane. There's a lot of kill threat here.
Important to note here is that 113 was not spotted on his clear. There was a ward on his red, but he was not seen, so they don't know exactly where he is. He is just going to sit onto this mid lane. A flash Q would spell a very difficult situation for Eika, but again, very difficult to do that into a Syndra.
And if you haven't watched LDLC this tournament, I don't know how you can't have done that at this point. They're such an exciting team to watch. This is what they do. They're so good at looking at these volatile matchups mid lane and saying, okay, we'll match up our timings, jungler's going to be here, or support's going to be here at a dangerous point in the wave, and they cover Eika so well.
This is so dangerous for Cabo. He always used the jump. He's still got the flash, but let's see if Yike can play spoiler.
Gonna see him now. He's gonna hold the flag and drag for a little bit. Doesn't catch the boomerang on the backside of it, but the flag and drag into the flash is perfect. They flash on top of him. They get it. Wait, no, he cannot. And that is first blood going over to LDLC.
And just like that, Capo, he should have known that Yike was making his way up there. They got the bottom side scuttled, so there's only on the top side of the map that he could have been. The crash didn't come through fast enough, and when he jumped and still stayed aggressive, well, that's when he was punished by Yike.
Okay, and if Karmine Corp need to get ahead in this early game, that's the question we posited to them. Thought that mid lane might be one of the places they could get that lead. Didn't manage to get it so far. Top lane, another very important part of Karmine Corp's composition. Didn't manage to find the lead there either.
This is, again, just looking at it here, it kind of, as he said, should have really known that he didn't have the pressure from his jungler, and they actually saw him on a ward. You can see in the minimap, he goes over that vision, so he knows well and where this Jarvan is.
Of course, but once again, just phenomenal stuff from Yike as well. Even when the flash comes out from Cabo, he immediately sees it and punishes once again. So I feel like Yike, despite not having success with going down towards the bot side, had a clear game plan all along that he could just make his move up towards the top side of the map. And once again, LDLC in the early game, they gained themselves a small lead.
And it's, again, it's a lead in the right place as well. You've now got a Warden's Mail on your Sion versus largely AD topside. I know there's mixed damage on both Gnar and Volibear, but still, Warden's Mail, such an incredibly efficient item as one of those components. And suddenly, you're looking at this as a cull on Gnar and thinking, well, I'm going to have to wait a while until I really have the impact I want on this map. And that's going to start hampering Karmine Corp getting the early game leads again, which we've asked of them.
See what they want to go for it now. Of course, as you mentioned, the Warden's Mail makes it even harder to get down onto that Sion in the top side. And again, 113, he's on this Volibear, which is known for its early game prowess. We haven't really seen much from him just yet. I want to see if he can make something work. And right now, he's going to walk straight into Yike, but is a level ahead. He has those 2 camps up, so he is still going to be a very, big threat into the Volibear.
But even then, it's like, Volibear has power early. Yeah, he does when you don't know where he is most of the time. And again, it's just being spotted again. Yike, making sure that he's hanging around the enemy Raptor pit. Turns up there an awful lot in the early game. And LDLC, again, they might not get the largest gold advantages in the early game. Again, you can see it's actually fairly even. But they're just making sure that Karmine Corp, with their early power, can't do anything with it. It's still an impactful early game if it doesn't show in the gold.
And I feel like it's so important that you get the Drake, because you take it back to the discussion we had about the drafts initially, right? If LDLC just gets the Drake staggering from the early game, then all of a sudden, well, about 25 minutes, you're going to be up against potential soul fight. And if you're not feeling comfortable, and if your early game is not going your way, well, it's going to be incredibly dangerous for you. Once again, you have to get these tools ahead, right? Capo in the side lane, LeBlanc in the mid lane as well, because this Sion, as long as he keeps on stacking these armors, these magic resists later into the game, no one's going to be able to blow him up, and that's going to be a big difficulty for Karmine Corp.
We talk about Karmine Corp in their early game and why we expect so much from them, but you look at some of their stats during the entire main event of the Amazon EU Masters. First in goal difference of 14. First in team CS difference at 14 as well. These guys are, their bread and butter is just getting their lanes ahead.
Yeah, maybe it was a little bit of a spoiler earlier when we were talking about, oh, LDLC aren't actually the most dominant early game team. That's because Karmine Corp has stats like this. Look at that laning advantage. Their pound per pound players are so strong. 1-3 getting a little caught out.
He should be fine. He's just going to respect the fact that there was quite a few members of LDLC collapsing on him, so he'll have to forfeit the skull.
I saw a level 6 Syndra with Sock Shoes and Ignite coming down. So Goldberg was like waving frantically like, oh yeah, there's real kill pressure there.
And that's the big issue as well, right? Because if you just get caught off guard, yes, you can jump away as a Volibear, but he was not level 6 yet. He only had the flash to expand, so that could have been a real dicey situation. So we're going to see if they can still get that pressure going for them. 1-1-3 at least tries to get a little bit of pressure in the river, but in the end, this Color Crab will still go over to Eika, I think, once again. So LDLC still very comfortable in this early game so far.
And actually, one of the things, so we saw that obviously the Volibear had to back off in that bottom river. This is kind of this invisible pressure which LDLC, again, just managed to get time after time. And now this is starting to benefit the Syndra, who is starting to just pull ahead just a little bit in that CS. And it just means that if you're going to start shoving that lane, go into Fog of War, even LeBlanc doesn't really want to walk into Fog. Karmine Corp have to play so much more respectfully now. LDLC is starting to hit the power spikes.
Oh, was that stolen?
Yes, it was.
Oh, yeah. Dear. That's not an unfun time, but we are going to see the Moonlight Vigil coming out onto the box side.
Okay.
Hantera forced to flash away, but Exakick needs to be a little bit more careful. Does have a little bit of a healing there from the Rakan and should be fine, but that's the burst potential you get with the Aphelios Rakan.
It is, and it's Aphelios with the Caliber and Crescendum. It's the rifle turrets, connoisseur of all that weaponry, and the single target damage with that is so difficult to play against once you hit that level 6 mark. Yike also hit level 6 up on the top side of the map, and actually he was behind the XP for a little while, so Yike hitting that power spike even on the top side now too.
So silver lining for this is that you can now rotate Hantera out of the map quicker. Exakick getting a bit aggressive down towards the bot side. And Rekkles does have flash. I'm going to hold it for now, but Exakick can move out of the map with an item advantage against the Rakan, but currently DOS is level 6, so Herald Fight on the top side might be in the favor of LDLC as well, just because they have that ultimate advantage currently.
Okay, and this is actually, if we're talking about these AD carries, getting close to those 1v1s, but this is something which both teams do. They play away from their AD carries. They let them have their own little playground in that bot lane. No one's really going to be playing around them. The supports leave, and it allows them go towards top side, and it looks like LDLC, again with the power spikes hit when they have these level 6s, they've survived up to that point. They're feeling very happy about this, and now Karmine Corp, again, just keep revisiting that point. Kind of wanted them to get ahead. Losing the Herald, it's just another difficulty they're going to have to overcome. Another
little thing that can go the way of LDLC. It means they control the pace, they control the tempo wherever they want to play it or put it. With a Dragon spawning in just over a minute and a half's time, you would imagine that's going to be going into the mid lane to maybe force something there, because like you mentioned as well, big level 6 power spikes coming in.
Yeah, but I feel like Hantera might not be too far away from it either, but he's now going for a reset timer as well. Oh, he's actually going to cancel it. I was going to say you might go into the mid lane, just soak up some XP, make sure you get level 6, and then at least remain competitive with DOS in a potential team fight. He's got 1 minute to make it happen, but with resets coming through first from LDLC and the later resets coming through from Hantera, specifically the support, the warding will come down faster from LDLC, and they should be setting themselves up more favorable for the Drake.
That was actually pretty close on that mid lane. I actually think SAKEN thought he would kill one of those backline minions with the Restore and get the chain through. Either just misjudged the still shot or the damage that was put out from it, but Eika now left alone in that 1v1 again. No people roaming up towards his lane, and we're left again in an even state where LDLC have largely neutralized this, what could have been a very active early game.
All right. Just over 45 seconds now until the Dragon spawns. Goldberg, where are you looking? What do you want to see? Do you even want to see both these teams fight at it, or are you expecting one just to leave it and go somewhere else?
I definitely feel like you need to play up the CC potential you have on the side of K-Corp with the Jarvan, not the Jarvan, with the Volibear and the Leona. If you can catch one member off guard, you can just instantly pop them up. We're still very early into the game. No one's really become tanky yet. If you do that and you can keep the Drake stacking going, but at least you got some slim win condition or someone you can get ahead.
DOS slipped in behind enemy vision. 1-3 caught out.
And they're going to be able to get a little bit of a CC chain going, but it's just the quickness for the ultimate of the Volibear. So not exactly the best of trades there for the side of Karmine Corp, but DOS still has to use his quickness.
Well, there are still several engaged tools left, but I mean, not having your jungler be able to get out with that get out of jail free card of that Volibear ultimate, I think that is more important for the fight, which might be brewing.
More pushing in this top side. It looks like the top laners are just kind of accepting they're not going to be part of this 4v4 potentially at the Dragon, as Ragner takes a uncomfortable trade and LDLC go back towards this Dragon. Now, Karmine Corp are in full awareness of this, but you can already see with 1-1-3 going towards that top side, they want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and you know what we said from K-Corp? We wanted Hantera, we wanted 1-1-3 to link up. Instead, it was Yike and DOS who was linking up. They are the one who were aggressive, right? So this mid-jungle support synergy that we've been speaking so much about from LDLC still showing up, and it's netting them this objective. Because yes, they started grouping up in the jungle from K-Corp, they started looking for something, but then lanes just started to get shoved in. Rekkles was having to go down towards the bot side, collect the wave, and all of a sudden, the teamwork K-Corp tried to set up was split apart, and LDLC could just take care of the objective.
And we haven't really had much chance to talk about Yike and DOS as a duo this game yet, but honestly, this tournament, okay, look, jury's still out on who I think has been the best player this tournament, but I think best duo has been Yike and DOS for me. I think they have been incredible as jungle support. Already talked about the impact it has on neutralizing mid lanes, which can be volatile, but just in the game in general, LDLC's jungle support have been so impactful.
It's even so funny, you know, we had an interview with DOS as well, and he was talking about how it felt having Yike join the roster when they initially built LDLC, and Yike was the big question mark, because he was the new guy coming in from the 2nd division of France, so they're like, I'm a little scared of this one, but the more they started to spend time together, the more comfortable they got, and they had this system where, you know, every feedback is good feedback, doesn't matter how hard it is, we all want to improve, and you can say, tell rather, that has really helped that roster in terms of how they have this mid-jungle support synergy.
Ooh, ult pulled out by Hantera, not going to find anything. Of course, 1-3 didn't have the ult either, would have been a little hard to follow up, but that's still LDLC getting gold into that Syndra, who we said was actually maybe the one early game question mark from LDLC. You want them to get ahead. DOS maybe getting caught, but here's a Rakan, very, very slippery.
Combination with the Jarvan as well. They have such massive movement between the two of them that they just combo up so beautifully, and that's why we see this combination of jungle and support so often. They just synergize very, very well as well. So we'll see though. Scout of the Week will land, stopping the chain.
Okay.
There's the ultimate. SAKEN needs to run away from this one here. He knew if he gets one more Q, he was dead.
Now imagine that when Syndra is just, if you give 1 or 2 kills to that Syndra, that trade goes from bad to worse. Both these mid laners, I love their confidence. They've both gone for the Sork Shoes. They've both gone for the M-Band over getting some magic resist. And you can see what that means when you do just get hit by that one stray skill shot.
And down towards the bottom side, minion wave pushing in. Coming through, and you know, I can't help but looking at the minimap right now. I'm looking at the plating in the mid lane. There's only 2 left for LDLC to take. In the bot lane, only 2 from the bot lane to take as well from that point of view. So, like, yes, they're a kill ahead right now, but there's also so massively ahead in terms of the gold that they've been able to pick up on the map as well. You take a look at the jungle camps.
Ooh,
Cabo.
scary.
He's going to be fine for the moment, but will just take a very unfortunate trade and back himself away. Ragner will have to be careful of those extended trades.
The problem is he can't even trade back, right? Because Ragnar has exhaust as well. So yes, the extended trade in a normal scenario would be super annoying, but then all of a sudden you're up against the top laner who's taking in another summoner spells. Reason why he had to back up was that there was no mid lane prior. SAKEN was moving up towards that top side. He had to respect it. But even then, you can even see the strong side we wanted to get ahead from K-Corp. It's struggling.
Yeah, he laughs in the face of your Syndra and then exhausts you and walks away. I mean, it's still going to be a matchup which is going to slowly win out for Karmine Corp. It's just maybe not at the rate which you would quite like. Because, yeah, you've popped the cull, you do have a CS advantage, but mid lane's actually where the point of action is
they get him in, and they're going to be able to CC him down. SAKEN picks that one up. That is good proactive play, and Karmine Corp wipe up mid lane.
That's exactly what we needed to see from them. Unfortunately, it's a little too early to pick up the next objective, but that's what gains you the prio. That's what gains you a point of attack next time around. Problem is, for this next objective, Eika will still have flash. You don't have flash in the Volibear, so trying to replicate this is going to be difficult, and can you survive it? So if it's only on a 5-minute timer every time, it's going to be questionable to see.
So that play caught me a little bit off guard. I looked to the side, I was like, oh, it's top lane, and then suddenly, even over vision, which LDLC had on the bot side of mid, Karmine Corp managed to at least get something there. And we do know, even though it's quite a large investment in Summoners, you're absolutely right. The next fight, Karmine Corp are going to be at a lower point of power because they can't flash onto their priority targets. In the individual 1v1, talked about how flippy this matchup can get, how swingy it can end up being. But LDLC, what can they do now with this Summoner spell advantage?
Yeah, I feel like it's just going to be a little war of attrition here. Who can get the vision around the Drake? But once again, Exakick pushed in bot all the time. SAKEN, though, on better roam timer. They have to respect it. But once again, there's so much mobility in Yike and Doss's kit right now. And they know that. That's why they're not getting aggressive.
And that's the real power point of a lot of these team compositions. It is about that mobility. Now, mobility, because in the current era of League of Legends, most champions have a couple of dashes tacked onto them somewhere. You kind of forget about it. When you have the Volibear ult, helps you get that extra kind of target access. When you have all of these things across the board, it becomes ever more important to track that.
Well, SAKEN clearing the wave in mid lane. We are going to have the dragon spawning in 13 seconds. Only the second Drake for either of these teams, so no one really on a world record-setting pace for the soul, but good to have regardless. And you can see now Karmine Corp trying to push back the vision that was garnered by LDLC. And important to recognize here, Doss does have a stopwatch. He's the only one on either team that has it, so that could be pivotal if we go to a big 5v5.
But also look at the rotation currently on the minimap, right? I'm going to hold my mouse. SAKEN getting aggressed on, but manages to back out. And here he is, Cabo. That's the guy I wanted to highlight. The decision-making coming through from LDLC is that, well, we don't want to fight for this Drake. We're just going to keep Ragner in the top side. Yes, you can join in with Cabochard. We'll give over this objective, but we'll be able to retain pressure on the map. Cabo, he's losing so many minions on the top side right now to make this play happen.
And I do appreciate the, maybe the wisdom to not just go into the fog of war for these kind of fights. As you're saying, no one's on a world record setting pace for these Dragon Souls. It's not going to be a game winning play if you pick up that Dragon, but it could be a game losing one if you give over huge fights just kind of out of nowhere. So LDLC just making sure that they're playing with vision first, making sure that they're not giving easy fights over to Karmine Corp, which is again one of the other things you mentioned. Karmine Corp are very happy to pick up scrappy fights because of their champions having the LeBlanc, the Ezreal, everyone kind of being able to hop into the fight very, very easily. And LDLC very content to not give them those fights.
I still felt like Ragnar could have excelled a little bit more on that top pressure instead, but he's still the one pushing in a wave. Second Rift Herald has spawned, and once again we see the famous link up. Yike and Doss together once again to retain vision in the enemy's jungle to apply pressure on their enemies. And I think they're doing it down towards the bot side currently because they want to break open that first turret. It's incredibly low already, and coming on this wave, there we have it. Exakick will just be able to pick up the first turret of the game.
And guys, I think I speak for everybody watching this game that it has been a slow burner for a game one. This has very much been a, we know how we can win, we don't want to give it up. As I say that, SolarFlare does miss, Hantera can't really follow up, and this is the problem you're going to have as Karmine Corp. Very slippery to land on these LDLC champions.
And not even the Ashin caster curse can speed up the game too much. It was almost there. You can see the attempt, but I think you are right in terms of like maybe we would have expected a little more early aggression, but that for me, the onus was on Karmine Corp to do the aggressive plays. It's not an LDLC. LDLC are very happy to neutralize, and this is what they have done the entire tournament.
But that's what it comes down to, exactly. The fact that Karmine Corp, it's on them to make these plays, and as you said, LDLC, it's more about just sitting back, like giving over these few objectives, that's nothing to them. They're the one who'd be stacking on them, but if it comes down to fights around the soul, for Karmine Corp, still you're happy about it. You just want the team fight scenarios to come through. You want to be able to plummet in that front to back line where you're playing for the Aphelios afterwards.
The big thing I'm noticing is that similar to what just happened there, you're not really 100% ready for the damage that's going to be coming down. Now Yike goes in aggressively, does use the ultimate as well, forces the ultimate out of 1-1-3, as we do see that the Aphelios was trying to help on the bottom side, as we can see Hantera going a bit aggressive. Doss is in a little bit of trouble, they flash him, they are able to get him down. Yike has to flash over the back of the pit, but at 1-1-3, he's already dead. Now it's a 4v5 as they try to make this one work. It's very scrappy, it's very all over the place, and that's 2 kills over to LDLC. Now, Cabochard, can you do anything? Not really, you're a little baby. There's nothing you can do in baby form.
And the big thing here is that LDLC, they do have power spikes to play around. Karmine Corp maybe over-engage a little into them, but you're engaging into an Aphelios, probably the king of all champions that want to be engaged into. Ragner's fine here, he's going to be okay.
But that's what we're talking about, this composition. Ragnar so many times on the Sion, we saw it on the semi-finals as well. He gets so tanky to the point where you can throw everything at him. And it will matter apparently, because he just one-shots him.
Oh my gosh, again, LDLC, they have the power spikes. Syndra, if you hit stuff onto a target, they pop at this point. Your Aphelios is at almost that 2-item mark. You have your level 2 ultimate. You're very happy to fight around your Aphelios in terms of spikes of power. Whereas Ezreal, for that fight, didn't have the Muramana, couldn't say the same for Karmine Corp and what they could play around in terms of damage.
And this is what I was trying to get up to before the fight literally broke out, as we have a quick look at it, is that these are points now where the damage is so significant because of how late into the game it is.
Yeah, and this is kind of beyond the early game potential onslaught that could have come from Karmine Corp. I thought maybe they could have skirmished a little heavier, but they weren't willing to give LDLC the ability to kind of get their own leads, because you can see what happens when LDLC do reach their power spikes. I think Karmine Corp maybe split their focus a little much, but you can just see it's so hard to fight once that Sion's in front of you.
And that's the problem as well. You use so many ultimates in the beginning of the skirmish, or when the members of LDLC finally started grouping up. Once again, as Alex just said, they're split now. Members of LDLC, they're completely fine with this one. And the worst is that lots of these kills are going over to Exakick, who's going to be your carry, who's going to be the guy who's going to be so incredibly difficult to deal with. And I mean, once again, Ragner on the Sion. This is going to be the story for the rest of the game now.
Just gets 50% HP taken off and watch. SAKEN goes in, blink, and you'll miss it. That's how quickly he dies.
I mean,
Jesus.
Dies before the clone can even spawn. That's pretty quick.
It's when you look at your death recap and it just said 0, 0, 0.
Yeah. It's like, sorry, there's nothing else we can do here. As we set ourselves up, we come back into the game. It is now 45 seconds until the dragon spawns. Important to know, a couple of key flashes are down. Cabo, 113, and Hantera all waiting on theirs. You got key carries, though, here for the side of Karmine Corp that could do damage.
Could do damage, but they're actually now getting to that point where it's starting to be a more significant gold lead. Both actually side lane outer towers have gone down. This is another LDLC kind of specialty we've seen. Big fight happens. Oh, wait, actually an outer tower's fallen somewhere else in the map because either they've left Exakick there or someone else has been pushing it. And from that, LDLC are starting to accrue quite a large amount of gold.
Yeah, and they're starting to accrue quite a lot amount of map pressure as well. The fact is that now Karmine Corp, they have to be wary of the Baron buff who's suddenly up. They have to be wary of the Drake as well. There's so many fronts of the map where they have to get defensive vision, but you don't have enough vision in your toolkit to actually deal with that. And all of a sudden, you're going to be put in a position that's going to be difficult to deal with. It allows you to not only go for the Drake immediately, because then LDLC would have just cross-mapped, and that allows now LDLC to just for free walk into the Drake instead.
As we were saying, you know, Karmine Corp, they do have 2 dragons in pocket. They're not upset letting away that dragon, but it does mean that for both teams, we are miles away from a soul. So we are starting to get into some seriously late game territory, and I think both teams have options. But like you said, LDLC, they just have a much happier time playing the map with the composition they've built.
And there are a couple of sad scenarios here for Karmine Corp, because if you get yourself an Ocean Soul, you're still against a team which is probably going to one-shot you, so you're not going to regen. You're also against a team that loves that Ocean Soul because they actually have a tank, which, as we said, you can't do the same to you with something like your Ezreal or your LeBlanc. You can do significant damage, but they're going to get a lot of value out of an Ocean Soul. Karmine Corp giving up that dragon, it feels pretty bad for them, but they didn't have an option to take it really either. It's not worth them forcing.
And out of all the games where Cabo is not going for that hull breaker, I actually feel like this would have been a game where enabling a side lane instead probably could have bailed them out a little bit in terms of the pressure, because going for these team fights, it's just not going to work for you, right? It's going to be incredibly difficult.
And actually, that was a big thing which I picked up from the semifinals, where Karmine Corp have struggled with side lanes for most of this tournament, actually. And the Hullbreaker champions, which we saw that Cabochard bring out in that semifinals, kind of papered over the cracks there. Now, Cabochard does have an individual lead, does have tank-killing items, and will have some pressure in that side lane. Question is it going to be enough at this point? Because the LDLC, again, as we were saying, they've hit their power spikes, they can start darting that Baron, they have an Aphelios and a Sion that can tank and damage it so easily. I don't think Karmine Corp are going to find it easy to play around side lanes again.
And the thing is, once again, LDLC, they're so intelligent around their lane assignment too, right? Because you have teleport on Ragner too, just pushing down towards the bottom side. Make SAKEN be the one to respond him. So yes, you talk about the tank-killing items, it's not going to matter because he's pushing on the top side, and it was Yike who's up there just before.
Not only just that, but even if we do get into a, big 5v5 fight where Karmine Corp have, say, the advantage, they get vision, whatever way it works out. Look at the stopwatches available to LDLC. You have a stopwatch on your Jarvan, you have a stopwatch on the Aphelios, and still from minute 10 on DOS. So this is still a team that's going to be very, very difficult for you to actually lock down and burst out.
Oh, well, speaking of that, DOS might get locked out.
Yeah, he's going to go for it, but they're going to have the ultimate here, and that's just so much damage. You can see them coming in now with Ragner on the teleport. They will get Cabochard over the wall, but he will die anyway. Yike flashes away, and there's just not enough damage. Triple kill there for Exakick, and that's just huge from LDLC.
And the target acquisition by Karmine Corp was utterly all over the place. They go onto the Rakan, who has the stopwatch, has all the escape tools in the world, and they get blasted by the Aphelios.
But they're also so desperate, right? They just see one person out of position and just like, we have to get this guy. We have to get something back into this game. And because of that desperation, you make a move that's not favorable to you. It's easy for LDLC to collapse on you afterwards, and we just see how easily they're cleaned up. LDLC now, they get the Baron buff, and they're put in such a good position now.
And this is exactly what we talked about. You step too far, you go too far forward to try and make something happen. LDLC destroy you in this.
And this is maybe the most unfortunate situation you can walk into. You just walk into a 3-man Inferno Mult, which you set up basically for them. The target choice of Karmine Corp here, it just feels like the very worst one you could have got. Again, it screams desperation. I think you're right.
I just love Nightmare. You were talking about how Dust was potentially getting caught, and all of a sudden I see 3K Corp members caught in a Cataclysm with Aphelios Moonlight Vigil with the Flamethrower coming through as well, and everyone just dies on my screen.
I call that one the Mega Infernum Bomb.
There you go.
We bring the fireworks here.
I don't even know how to respond to that one there.
No, just leave it, move on.
We can move on. But look at the goal difference here. Thank you so much to our observer. It's about 1,000 in the mid lane, about 2,000 in the jungle. Exakick is now ridiculously just so far accelerated. Dots will still need to be careful because that LeBlanc still does damage, but again, he's a Rakan.
And it does feel like LeBlanc has all of the agency left in this game for Karmine Corp, and it's not much. You're looking for miracle picks, you're looking for something. Again, this damage does add up. If you're removing someone's ability to engage on the side of LDLC, maybe it's something, but it's so hard to chain together.
And I just want to say, guys, I don't know, the last time I saw a top lane on a weak side like Sion be level 16, have more gold than the mid laner that's level 14 currently on the Syndra. Ragner on weak side duty this game, he got one gank, and after that, man's just taking over, been a threat in these team fights, and you can see it. He's still the front line that they can't deal with. It's so easy for LDLC to set up a siege.
Okay, well, Karmine Corp still trying to get something in those side lanes, talking about weak side, strong side, so it looks like Cabochard's just on his own side of his lonesome because LDLC not even entertaining the thought of kind of going to respond to that. They know where they're strong, they know they can pile in with this Baron buff, and they're very happy to continue down to the spot side for now.
He's very happy to go for it, but this is only a tier 2. Cabochard is going to hit Mega. I was thinking maybe they could go for a TP, but it's very deep if they want to go for it. It's all the way back in the river, and there we go. The stun goes land with the Hantera, who's just not very tanky. These solo flares have just been little whispers of flame on a very windy night. They have not been hitting their mark, but he does find on the backside. SAKEN trying to find Yike, who's very, very low. He has to keep himself alive. Now Ragner goes in and try and keep his team going, and will just be an absolute wall of meat and just soaks up absolutely everything.
Oh, SAKEN still on the side looking for something. He's not going to find it just yet, and it feels like Karmine Corp, they tried to call the bluff. They tried to say, you will not deal with this side lane, but then they just end up losing that Mind War. LDLC, they win the fight, and they get Cabochard's TP away from the side lane.
SAKEN's got to go for something. You can see him, he's trying so hard, and they're getting them so low, but they can't really make it happen. Dots goes a little bit too far forward! Cabochard into the wall, and out of nowhere, a clean ace for Karmine Corp!
They turn the game upside down with that engage. The question is, how much on the map can they get now? There's no Baron to be taking. They can get the third Drake for themselves, but that's a statement engage, and that puts the morale back into the game.
And it looked like LDLC had found themselves the winning mind game. They'd called away the side laner. They'd found a pick. Surely they would have survived after that point with their Baron buff, with their gold lead, but no. Cabochard punishes so hard.
And when you need someone to step up, when you need a hero play, Cabochard has proven time and time again, he is the man for that play.
And it does feel like, you know, regardless of the analysis you have on Karmine Corp, the one thing you cannot take away from this squad is that mental fortitude. They were down 0-2 in that semi-finals. They were on the brink of being pushed out of this competition. They came back with a reverse sweep. In this first game, feels like it's pretty much unlosable for LDLC, and then that happens.
But even then, with an engage like this, the boys in blues, right, they'll have to replicate this somehow because it's still a lead over to the side of LDLC. It's still 2 inhibitors down. Mid lane has fallen. Bot lane has fallen. There's only top lane to deal with right now. LDLC, they can continue playing 2 lanes. They can play 1 lane if they want to because they still have that frontliner. And remember, that engage came off the back of an overextension of LDLC. They might not make the mistake again.
Yeah, and look again. Look, you can see LDLC said, okay, we're not allowing this to happen. You remember those 5 stopwatches or 3 stopwatches? We're now up to 5 stopwatches. You know, the only one that's broken is basically on Yike, who doesn't really need one given his items right now with Death's Dance. And like you said, it's going to come down to maybe another miracle engage, but a Scatter of the Week landing on the 1-1-3 isn't a great start to this. Cabochard, though, trying to look for something because he's going to go Mega very, very soon. Yike is deleted, and all of a sudden, we're feeling the momentum, Nightmare. We're feeling a little bit of a move. They're going to go for it. They're going to see if they can get Cabo to get something on the back of this. He's going to take a lot of damage, though, and he's a little bit isolated. It's a 3-man knockback, but the rest of his team wasn't there.
And he gets just a little ahead of himself. You can see the angle. He has that flash. You saw what happened in that last play. They get one lucky pick, but as Goldberg was saying before, it's just really hard to replicate this. And LDLC LDLC, they saw what happened the last time, and not easily going to give it to him again.
And now K-Corp, they're going to be feeling the pressure of those inhibitors we spoke about as well. Mid lane pushing in, bot lane coming in as well. That means LDLC, they can continue with their pressure on the top side, and they can still continue getting out objectives. So even when they trade 1-for-1, which seems like a good situation for K-Corp, it still ends up favoring LDLC in the end.
It does feel, again, each minute that ticks by, even though Karmine Corp are up at that soul point, even though the gold is, it becomes more even in terms of percentage gold as you go on. LDLC's comp in a 5v5 is still so very, very happy to play around these grouped up fights. Gonna go back into the replay and see exactly what happened the last time, though, because, I mean, Iika just gets caught out very far out of position. Does have the stopwatch, but doesn't find a chance to use it.
It does have the stopwatch, does have the flash. It seems like he disrespected the momentum and the damage coming through. You see all the pick potential, actually beautiful. Mystic shot from Rekkles on the left, House coming through from Cabochard on the right, and then the chain as well. And there we have it. What you talk about as well, Nightmare, he just gets too aggressive in this situation.
And as much as the Gnar was kind of like the focal point of that last fight, and you can use the Jarvan Cataclysm as terrain for your own ultimate, again, it's just a little bit far removed from the rest of your team. The follow-up just wasn't there.
And the big thing there for Karmine Corp is Baron is on the table. LDLC basically have full control over where they're going, so they're going to have to fight for every little bit of vision. And not only that, they have inhibitors to deal with as well.
And we've seen some pretty large comebacks in this competition, and a lot of them have been through Baron steal. So I'm not going to write Karmine Corp off just yet. Again, the competition going to find it very, very hard to get towards this Baron. DOS is playing blocker, playing gatekeeper, but 113 does have that ultimate.
Not the best guns right now. Let's see if he gets the shurikens off the Gravitum coming through. That would change the situation. No, it's going to be Flamethrower as well. So he does have that AoE damage, but Baron still take a little time, but it's falling fast now.
Yeah, they can't really get in on top of this. You can see that 113 wants to go for something, but it's gone. It's dead. There's nothing you can do. Iika, though, he's going to be flashed on. There's the stopwatch we talked about earlier. They're going to try and jump in. Cabochard gets the stun off. They will kill off the Syndra. Now, the Aphelios is your next target. He flash, he cleanses, and he's going to be able to take down Cabochard. That's a 1-for-1 trade as the ultimate comes out from the Jarvan. 113 forced to use his ultimate in defense. You still get the kill, you still get the Baron, and this is still momentum for LDLC.
And the Baron's the big thing here. Your base is sat there in tatters. One inhib still down, another one open. Karmine Corp, they're finding individual picks, and that's all well and good, but they can't chain them together into anything more than that.
It's not just individual pick. They might absolutely hate Iika. They keep finding him in these fights, but in the end, it's still Karmine Corp who falters. It's LDLC who gets to be the aggressives, and now SAKEN might be the one who's getting some attention, but no, they'll just be escorting 2 supers in. They have the Baron buff. They might even potentially look for an end here.
Now the inhibitor is going to respawn, so they're probably just going to try and take that one off again, but they have to be very careful. Remember, Exakick had to flash and cleanse to try and get that kill onto Cabochard, so he doesn't have those tools available to himself.
And the difficult thing here now for LDLC, or potentially difficult thing, is that they played around that top side where they had their vision. They've switched very quickly to the bot side of the map. Dangerous point about this is that you don't have the same kind of ward coverage. Dragon's coming up, Cabo has that TP, and we've seen what a big Gnar TP can do before. So LDLC not going to take that risk, going to reset, going to walk through their own side of the jungle, make sure that they're covering their bases.
And I feel like that's important to set as well the stakes where you need to succeed for Karmine Corp now, because it is about finding that flank, it is about finding that backline. The only fight that we saw K-Corp winning was the fact when 3 members were just pinned up against the wall. Doing that in an area around Drake here is going to be incredibly difficult, especially when you're not the team setting up for it. So there's a lot of pressure for K-Corp. They need to get backline access, and if they don't, LDLC, they should just be able to front to back it.
And to revisit what we kind of saw right off the bat, again, this is why Karmine Corp, we wanted them to have that early game lead. It's just difficult to play against this comp in the late game. If Ragner is in the right spot, you don't get through them easily. LeBlanc does not want to dive over it. You can start blocking up someone like the Gnar as well. And see now Yike on the backside, and LDLC setting up for one of those 5v5s yet again.
Remember, Karmine Corp, you do not have to flip for this objective. You do not need to go for this. This is only going to be soul point for LDLC. It will not be the soul itself. SAKEN trying to go off the backside. It's secured as Cabochard's getting himself up to Mega. He's seeing if there's a bit of an angle to come in onto this. 113 trying to see if he can facilitate at that as well. But again, Ragner just playing bouncer, saying, look, you can't get anywhere near my team.
And just like that, they're just going to be escorting with the minion mate down towards the bot side. They're forcing K-Corp to pincer around. They have to go for the recalls instead. There's so much ground that K-Corp need to cover. They're just not going to be able to do it as a 5-man unit. LDLC, they're keeping the pressure up. They want that bot side inhibitor.
And they still have the Baron up for just maybe one more wave. You can see it ticking down on that hotbar on the bottom left, and LDLC using this to just get themselves that last inhibitor.
You got to be so careful, those LDLC. You can't over-aggress onto this as you haven't got great guns. It is just the Gravitum and Infernum here, so they'll take their inhibitor, their prize, and they'll try and back themselves out. That's a lot of damage, and a slow as well because of the Sorrel-just grudge. Cabochard's building up the Mega once more. DOS does get himself back out with the paddle dance, and you can see they're SAKEN up to the top side of your map. He's trying to find an angle.
Again, so LDLC, they have those 2 inhibs down, they have the minions helping them out, but they still don't have all of those wards cleared out on the bottom side of the jungle. This is the danger, but they're looking for the engage.
They're looking for Cabo, but he's got himself the base gate, so he's going to be able to get out. 1-1-3, needs to be careful. SAKEN's on the backside, but Yike's going to play away. Try and keep Eika there, but oh my god! They try and burst him out, but he just can't do it. Cabochard goes in, but he loses the Mega before he can use the ultimate. And look at Exakick, he's just completely untouched and just free-firing. It doesn't matter what SAKEN's trying to do because your base is being torn to shreds.
And once again, you needed to deal with Exakick, but you're not able to do that. He's just going to load onto your team with all the damage that we're seeing. They're looking for the end now for the first game in this series.
They're going to go try and look for it. SAKEN's nowhere near to be found. Rekkles is still doing some pretty decent damage, but he only takes down the tank of the Sion, and that's going to be LDLC 1-0 up in this series, and they looked in total control.
And it felt like this was a very typical LDLC game. They neutralize early, they make sure that the volatile lanes go in their favor because nothing's happening with them, and then they go into those 5v5s where they are so confident.
But I also feel like KCOM, what they learned from Vitality, they really didn't apply that here. You know, finding that front-to-back team fight, having SAKEN on this a backline carry that can just deal with frontliners, like when a Sion comes out, or when you have to play the front-to-back. I feel like you also need to give Rekkles some more agency as well on this Ezreal. He's just there to clear waves. So once you come to the team fight stage, that Mystic shot he's going to be firing at the Sion, it's never going to matter.
And apart from that one play from Cabochard down bot side, it didn't really feel like LDLC lost control. It was just kind of a blip in the radar, and that was kind of all it was. But LDLC strike first in this all LFL Amazon EU Masters Finals and keep their undefeated streak alive. Can the Blue Wall strike back in Game 2? We'll find out after this.
Jackie, tu as déjà commencé?
De se balader jusque vers le bot lane, mais Rekkles maintenant est couvert par la wave.
Les dégâts sont énormes.
Nie kupisz, jak nic ci nie stało. Lecisz do Polska, do przodu biało-czerwoni. Polska góra.
Dobra, najważniejsze jest to. Algorogue wychodzi z tej grupy.
Vamos a ver si puede cerrar aquí el partido Fnatic.
Vamos ganando, hijo.
Porque es Fnatic sin queso.
And they're going to take that last victory home.
And they advance to the Amazon EU Masters Finals. They take that Nexus and they get their rewards. Just like you. Have you got your rewards yet? Look at your phone. You got this week's rewards.
What did you guys get?
I got a Teemo skin. Not bad.